Calwell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's always a great pleasure to deliver an address and reply. If I can say, if you're doing it, it means you've been re-elected to your job, because that's what it is, and it's a job that I very much enjoy. I do want to thank the member for Ballarat, who she and I share the privilege of coming into this place at the same time, and it's fabulous that she is now at the forefront of defending Medicare. And I certainly stand with her in that effort. I know how important Medicare and bulk billing in particular and health, affordability of health is to the people that I represent in this parliament. Deputy Speaker, I'm very privileged to have been re-elected as the member for Calwell. It was my sixth election, and I feel that I feel a great debt to the people that I represent in this parliament. I've gotten to know them very well over the years, and for new members, Dr Anne Ali, the member for Cowan, she will eventually come to realise this, and the member for North Sydney will come to realise this, that eventually you build a very strong relationship with the people that you represent. And it is a relationship that's based on friendship in many ways, trust. They place a lot of trust in us as their elected representatives to be here to advocate on their behalf and to certainly be vigilant on their behalf when policies are being implemented or seeking to be implemented that would be detrimental to their daily lives. And I have indeed formed very strong relationships with my community, and I want to talk about that community today. And I also want to spend some time, quite a bit of time, I don't normally do this, to thank the very many people that have come with me in the time that I've been into Parliament and have helped me and have assisted me, and I have the great pleasure of working with. I've often said that my electorate is probably one of the most culturally diverse electorates in Australia. It's also an electorate that is quite happy to re-elect Labor members of Parliament. And I think after being the Labor Federal Member of Parliament and talked about my relationships with them, I've come to understand why it is that they place their faith in the Australian Labor Party, and I'm very privileged to be the Labor Member for Calwell. And as other colleagues have said before me, I don't get elected as Maria Van Vakenau, the individual. I get elected as the Labor member or the Labor candidate for the Federal Seat of Calwell, and I acknowledge that and appreciate it. Calwell, I'm sure they've come to like me. I think they've realised that I share a very strong identification. Thank you for prompting me. Member for North Sydney, I share very strong identification with the people that I represent, and I think that that is why we have such a bond and an empathy. It is predominantly a migrant community, a community that has the same experiences that my own family have had, and I, who arrived here as a 4-year-old child in 1963, and that gives my age away. It doesn't matter when you get to this stage. I came here under the Arthur Calwell migration program. It was an expansive, massive migration program that was deliberately designed to set the foundations for modern Australia, for contemporary. It was a nation-building exercise. My family and I, as I'm sure Dr Ali's family, were part of that. I can reflect back on it now, 60-odd years or 65 years later, after Arthur Calwell, Australia's first migration minister, literally went out and sourced migrants from war-torn Europe, as I've said in this place before, from the UK and even the United States. Sourced them because, as he said, and I think it's very important for us to know our history, as he said that we could not hold this continent with 7.5 million people. Today this continent sits at 23 million people, and might I just say that those politicians of that time and that Labor government of that time had envisaged a bigger Australia. They had envisaged a bigger Australia, and they set the foundations for it. And the many people in my electorate who've come here under those programs in subsequent decades, in particular the Turkish community, who after the official abolition of the White Australia policy saw the great migration of people from Turkey They settled in Calwell. They actually came to Australia, got off a plane at what was known as Tullamarine Airport. Today it's the Melbourne Airport, and were driven some 10 minutes down the road, Deputy Speaker, to the Mega Barracks, which at that time were similar to perhaps Bonegilla, but in inner Melbourne, were actually hosting as hostels newly arrived migrants from Turkey, and then they just left the hostels and moved up the street, and they have built a wonderful community. And as a result of them being, the Turkish community being in the Federal Seat of Calwell, when I describe the seat, I can say that it has the largest constituency of Australians of the Muslim faith in Victoria. When I first came here, I believe we held in the country, we had the largest in the country, but some seat in Western Sydney that I won't make reference to holds that now. But in any case, it's a wonderful and vibrant community. We have people from 100 different ethnic groups. We have the established communities, very large Italian community, very large Greek community, very large Serbian, Croatian community. We have emerging communities from the subcontinent. We have quite a number of people coming and settling in our region from Nepal, but my biggest emerging community of all are the Chaldean Christians from Iraq, and they have been settling in the area over the last 25 years since the two Iraq wars. Recently they actually celebrated 25 years since they began coming to Australia as refugees. In addition to that, and they are a growing community, and they face lots of the similar sorts of issues that migrants or refugees would face when coming to Australia, or especially those that have been dislocated, quite forcibly and unexpectedly from their home. They will face the same sorts of problems in many ways that perhaps a lot of the migrants and refugees who came to Australia in the 60s did, which is why we have this empathy, and I can identify so strongly with them. That makes my job all the more rewarding. In the time that I've been the member, I've forged a very strong relationship with the Iraqi Chaldean community and the Assyrian Eastern Orthodox Christian community. I have both in my seat. And a very strong relationship I've formed with them, and I've watched them grow, especially in the last decade, and begin to build the fundamental the foundations and the infrastructure of any community that moves into a particular area. Some people like to call that kind of congregation a ghetto. It's not a ghetto, and I reject that term outrightly. It is communities who come to live in an area where they share common identity, common language, and in most places it's their places of faith that are established first. In this case with the Chaldeans, I have about 4 Iraqi Christian churches in my electorate. It is absolutely the natural progress of a community, and to sometimes refer to that as a ghetto is an expression of utter ignorance. I know it's used in contempt, and it's often used against my Muslim community in Broadmeadows, and I have often had to stand up here and defend that. In a strange sort of a way, the communities do their own infrastructure building, and they support each other in a way that actually helps government, assists the government's overall settlement program. So I see it as a settlement issue, not an issue of banding together to exclude everybody else. So it is, and this is how it is with the Iraqi Christian community. So I do want to thank Father Maher Gurgis from St George's Chaldean Church. In particular, I work with Father Maher often, and he is one of our local priests, Chaldean Catholic priests, who is charged with the pastoral care of the young members of the community. And he does a fantastic job and I like working with him and being able to help him in their settlement process and to help them. I'd like to also thank Father Kamal Bidawid from Our Lady Guardian of the Plants, the Chaldean Catholic Church in Campbellfield, and we had a very special visitor in November last year. The Governor-General of Australia, Sir Peter Cosgrove, and Lady Cosgrove attended the Advent Mass service, which marks the beginning of Christmas. They came down to my electorate and attended that service. The community was very, very honoured to have had them, and from my perspective, the presence of the Governor-General in particular is a very, very positive sign of acceptance, embracing and recognition of a new community. And it goes a long way to assisting the settlement process and the sense of belonging and being part of the Australian community. So I want to thank His Excellency in particular for coming to Calwell, to Our Lady, Guardian of the Plants. I did say that the community recently celebrated its 25 years of migration to Australia. They are doing a wonderful job, and I continue to work with them. I look forward to the submission that they're going to be making, or I understand have tabled, to the Joint Standing Committees on Immigration, inquiry into the settlement services. I'm very pleased that my community is able to participate in that process. I do want to also acknowledge Father Cordkis Tuma from St Abdicio's Assyrian Church of the East, and Father Johanna Matti from St Mary's Church, the ancient Church of the East, and of course Mr Elias Saliba and Father Afram from Mor Yaqub Syriac Orthodox Church in Mickleham. And I visited that church on a number of occasions. I've actually conducted an immigration clinic there after service on a Sunday, because such is the number of people in that community who are waiting for outcomes for family members under the additional 12,000 places of refugees from Syria, that it's just an indication of just how much is going on in my own electorate. And I do want to mention that in addition to having virtually every Christian from Iraq living in Calwell, I've also got a large number, some 2,500 or 3,000 expected of the intake, the 12,000 intake from Syria. So we've got a lot going on in the Federal Seat of Calwell, but I think we are well placed. We're a well-placed community to help and receive those newly arrived. And often the stories you hear are actually quite heartbreaking, and I want to pay tribute to my local schools in particular, who will receive children who've just come out of a war zone. And I have wonderful teachers and wonderful principals who actually go out of their way to ensure that those children and their families are assisted in a way that makes them feel not only welcome, but often a lot of those families are just left to find their way home in the streets of Broadmeadows and elsewhere, and they don't know how basic things like that we just take for granted, which can frighten people even more. So thank you to Good Shepherd Catholic School in my electorate in particular. Deputy Speaker, I also want to talk a little bit about the Oromo community, which is also settling in my electorate, and especially the women from that electorate, who I love to sit with and have coffee with and share their cooking advice. It's just part of the wonderful things that we do and we're exposed to as members of Parliament. And I feel now at this point I'd better start thanking a whole series of people that I often forget to thank, because, as other members have said, you don't do this on your own. You certainly don't get through an election campaign on your own, and you certainly don't work in your community on your own. And I don't, like all other members of Parliament. And I want to begin by thanking my staff. I want to thank Paul Caruso, Emily Ioannou, Marianthe Kipros, Stephen Fodrosi, Carol Fabian, and Nella Kachoba in particular, who form my core staff. And they're doing a tremendous amount of work, put up with a lot, but they also have a wonderful manner with our community, and it is really important that when you're not there, that your staff have the same sense of empathy and desire to help people that you do, because that reflects on you as well. So our staff really are at the door when we are away, and the community feels that it's being heard even though you're not there. So thank you to all my staff. I've picked up a lot of members of the community along the way who've become my friends, as I've said, and I want to try and thank as many of them as possible. I may try your patience, Deputy Chair, but I think it's really important to let people know that they are important to us, and certainly when we're up here we mention them. I want to start by thanking Michael Shergill, Hamza Wario, who runs the Oromo community, Irfan Hassan and Samit Ishtar, who are wonderful friends, wonderful Labor Party members and wonderful community members. Philip Dibiase, Bella El Baba, Ryan Moore and Justin Barber, Draga Atanasovsky, Draga, I'm sorry if you're listening, Madonna Awad from the Coptic community. I want to thank Walid Hanna from the local Iraqi community, who also runs our annual soccer tournament, the Iraqi Peace Cup. So he does a tremendous job in terms of social cohesion. I want to thank Ali Awan from our local Pakistan community, who is also responsible for organising the multicultural Eid festival, and I look forward to being able to attend that in June this year again. Joseph Tadaro, Karen Sherry, Louis Joseph from the Chaldean community. Louis is a wonderful supporter of the work that we do, and he's a conduit into the Chaldean community. And I want to thank him for making my job much easier as a result of his support and advice. I'd like to thank Thomas Kepler and Thekla Scarsella. Thekla is one of those wonderful migrant women who has managed to, apart from working factories, write lots of stories, and again indicating that those migrants who came here did have skills other than the ones that they were put to use in a factory. So thank you, Thekla, for being who you are. To John Patsika Theodoro and to Upul Chandana, to Joseph and Sheena Hawil, and I want to congratulate Joseph Hawil in particular, who was recently elected to the Hume City Council. Our councils had a changeover of the old guard, lots of young people, and Joseph's going to do a great job as a local councillor. To Peter Perner, a stalwart of the Italian community and one of the founding fathers of the Italian Club in Sunshine, to Terry McNaughton, to Chandra Bamunsinga, who is from the Sri Lankan community, and I do look forward to their lamp lighting ceremony. I think it's in a couple of weeks' time, the annual lamp lighting ceremony, which is usually a very cold morning in April, but I look forward to attending. David Carroll, Cheryl Woods, Peter Ryan, Ted Hayden, Tiana Taylor and Jeff Porter, both councillors at Hume City Council. To Ray Gorman, an old postie and someone who fought very hard for the rights of post office workers. Ramazan Altintash, very well known in the community as the founder of the Turkish RSL Club. To John Walsh, the founder of the Bridge of Hope Foundation, Kathleen Wallace, Sakib Awan and Uzma Rubab, who are members of the newly emerging International Students Pakistan community. They're teaching me a whole new world about the thinking and the psychology of newer migrants who are coming to this country, who come here as international students and who choose to stay here as residents. To Peter Massey, Daniel Grayson, thank you, Daniel, for being so passionate and caring about refugees. Daniel visits our local Melbourne Immigration Transit Accommodation Centre and just visits some of the people that have been in there for a long period of time. I'd like to thank Richard Donaldson and Sarah Angus, Jesse Awad. I'd like to thank Sam Caruso, Fatima Hoblos, Yusuf Al-Rimawi, Troy Atanovsky, Burhan Aaron, Pascal Elali, Don Townsend, Janet Curtin, my Janet Curtin, who's an advocate for people with disability. I want to thank her for her brightness, for her positivity and optimism. I'd like to thank Manny Malkos, also a great crusader for animal rights and Amnesty International, to George Johnson, to Chris and Despina Havelis, in particular Despina, who has established Autism Angels and works hard for children with autism. I really need to thank my family. I want to thank my husband Michalis and my children Stavros and Stella, who have been with me on this journey And I know we don't often talk about it, but balancing family life and this job is very, very difficult. My children were 6 when I came here, 6 and 8. They are now adults, and I know that we will all have time to reflect on how that impacted on our families, but I have a wonderful community that understands that, and I can talk to them about it and am supported not only by the community but my family as well, and I want to thank them very much.